So today we're with Dr. Erika Rosenberg, and she's an expert in the psychology of emotion and facial expression of emotion. So Erika, can you tell us something about how you got into this field of study?
It's kind of interesting because it's not something I thought I would do when I was a kid, that I would study facial expressions of emotion. But if you look at my baby pictures, it might have predicted this. But I was interested in the effects of emotions on health. In general, I was interested in stress and health. I went to the University of California, San Francisco in their health psychology program to get my PhD. After my first year, I met Paul Ekman, who was a professor there, and I found out he had really developed this field of the scientific study of facial expressions of emotion. So that's how I started working on it. I saw the face as a tool to measure emotion from a purely research point of view. But once I got into it, it led to this whole series of fascinating applications for studying the face.
Well, can you tell us something about what was some of the groundbreaking work that was done early on?
Right. I mean, its interest in the face in studying emotion actually goes pretty far back. It started in the 19th century when Charles Darwin published a book in 1872 called The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, where he had all these wonderful drawings and photographs of animals and humans. A lot of the pictures were of his kids making different emotion faces. And he was trying to make the argument that there's something fundamental about how emotion is shown, not just in humans, but in a variety of animal species, that is sort of inborn, innate. And he did very informal research methods of having people all over the world send him pictures from their journeys or drawings at the time and saying, if you show these pictures to people, do they recognize them as the same ones we do? And his anecdotal evidence were pretty consistent that there was a small set of emotions that are conveyed with certain facial actions that's consistent for all humans.
All over the world.
All over the world. And his research methods were not real precise. In the early 20th century, this idea of things being inborn was not very popular because behaviorism was just getting going. And it took until the 1960s, actually, when Ekman and Friesen did their pioneering work, not just to other industrialized nations, because they'd found some agreement consistent with Darwin's in industrialized countries. But they decided if you really want to find out if something's innate, not learned, then you have to go to cultures where they're not sharing the kind of information that we share in industrialized nations. Mm-hmm. So he went with an anthropologist friend to Papua New Guinea, which at that time no longer was a pre-literate culture. They didn't have exposure to any Western films or whatever. And Ekman and Friesen showed members of two different tribes there some of the photographs they'd used of certain poses of facial expression of emotion. But most of those people were, European American looking people. So they also gathered photos from the New Guineans themselves and used a variety of different methodologies. And surprised both Ekman, because he didn't expect to find this, and the scientific community, that there were about 5 or 6 different emotions for which the facial configurations were consistently recognized the same, both in, at the time Ekman was in Berkeley, California, and in Papua New Guinea. So that seemed to speak very powerfully to the idea that there were universal facial expressions of emotion. But this was a small set. So we're talking about anger, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, and surprise, about 6 emotions. To model these universal expressions, I'm going to need to take my glasses off. Now, the important thing to remember is that these are prototypes, so like any prototype, this is sort of like a classic, just like an apple's a classic fruit, and there's other fruits that are not, as typical. This is sort of the prototypical example of each of these emotions that I'm going to show you. So I'll start with anger. Anger, the brows are lowered, the upper eyelid is lifted, the lower eyelid is tensed, and the lips are pressed together. So I can't talk while I do that, so I'll do this. That's anger. This is disgust. So a key sign of disgust is the wrinkling of the nose. Fear. Happiness. Sadness. And surprise. And this is an emotion that later work has suggested is likely to be universal, or at least has some good cross-cultural agreement, and that's the emotion of contempt, which is the only of the set of universals that is only really a unilateral or an asymmetrical expression. That's contempt. But contempt wasn't one of the emotions they used in the early work.